My name is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. As we get older, many of us contemplate our legacy. We draft wills designating our beneficiaries to ensure that our material and worldly goods are distributed according to our desires. What about our spiritual legacy? How may we impart to our loved ones our values and beliefs, heal rifts and disagreements, and leave a lasting record of intentional living? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Rabbi Elana Zaiman, says we can do this by creating the Forever Letter. Elana Zaiman is the first woman rabbi from a family spanning 6 generations of rabbis. She serves as a chaplain and travels throughout the United States and Canada as a scholar in residence, speaker, and workshop facilitator, covering such topics as forgiveness, healing, vulnerability, and compassion. Her writings have been featured in magazines, literary journals, anthologies, and newspapers. You can visit her online at elanazaiman.com. That's ELANAZAIMAN.com. And she joins us this evening to discuss her brand new book, The Forever Letter, Writing What We Believe for Those We Love. Please welcome Rabbi Elana Zaiman. Good evening, Elana.
Hi there. Good evening.
Thank you so much for joining us, because I think your message and your book are very important for our listeners to hear.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. So let's start by sharing a bit about your path and how you chose to follow your family tradition to become a rabbi.
It wasn't quite a shoo-in there. When I was growing up, I grew up in my grandfather was an Orthodox rabbi, my father, traditional conservative. And so when I was a child, I thought nothing about becoming a rabbi because I couldn't. It wasn't open to women. At least, I think in the Reform movement, the first woman was ordained in 1972. And I don't know if that was privately ordained. I think in 1974 was when the Reform movement began to ordain women. And so the conservative movement, which was the movement I grew up in, didn't do that until 1984, which was when I graduated college. So as I was growing up, I grew up with the sense that this is something that a man does. And add to that, I went to a very Orthodox day school when I was a child, too. And the message that I received was that this is not a job for women or a calling for women. So to come to it, I remember in my senior year of college, my dad sent a letter from the Jewish Theological Seminary that he had received saying, we will be beginning to ordain women. And I'm not quite sure why he sent it to me, but he did. And that sort of sat there for a while. And I worked for a couple of years and then decided to apply to rabbinical school. But I do have to say that when I was a child, I loved going to synagogue. I loved hearing sermons. And I just felt that there was such meaning in words and the power of words and the power and ability to be able to speak things of meaning and have people hear them and how those things help you maybe better live your life. And so in that light, I would often conduct services with my stuffed animals. I would set them in the rug on the floor of my bedroom, and I would put prayer books in front of their bodies, and sometimes I would put a yarmulke on their head, and I would lead services as if I were the rabbi. But I couldn't be, but in this community of stuffed animals, I could be.
Absolutely. I have a sense that your dad saw something in you that convinced him that you were meant to follow that calling.
I don't don't know. He might have, but he too wasn't so supportive initially of women becoming rabbis, and didn't quite think it was because he came from an Orthodox upbringing. So it was new to him as well. And I remember when I applied to the seminary, he had said, why do you want to apply? You have so much knowledge. You can be a very active layperson. And I remember saying to him, Dad, but I don't want to be a layperson. I want to be a rabbi. And aside from that, I don't want to get in because of you, because of, he was very well known. He was very well known in the movement. And it's not because of you. I want to get in because of me. And he goes, you will get in because of you. And I remember when I left the synagogue that I was at Park Avenue Synagogue for 5 years in Manhattan, after I graduated rabbinical school, before I moved to Seattle. And I remember it was the weekend of my wedding as I was getting ready to leave, and my father said to me, this is what you're meant to do. You're meant to be a congregational rabbi. How can you leave it now? Yeah. So it was a coming of full circle.
Absolutely. And again, I think he had that sense, because I don't think he would have given you the initial information had he not seen that in you. I think that's something that's a great gift we can give our children. When we see something special in our children, it's so important to nurture those gifts and those interests, because ultimately that's the gift they can bring to the world. Don't you agree?
I do indeed.
Absolutely. Now, in this age of text messages and tweets, emails, and 140-character communication, letter writing seems to have become a lost art form. Why are letters so powerful?
The thing about letters that I find so moving is that it gives you time to reflect, and to reflect often over a period of time. You might write a letter that might start, one day, and you might finish it a couple weeks later. But there's a real reflective process going on. And in times of old, when there wasn't the possibility to connect so quickly, when you received the letter, you also had a sense that this person who wrote it really took the time to write it, and that you would lavish the receiving of it, because, wow, this is a connection from someone far away that I can't connect to otherwise. So the non-immediacy of it, I think, has some real appeal. And the other piece of it is that the recipient can really read it at their leisure, and they can reread it before they even respond. And there's something about both of those processes of reflection in order to write, to go deeper than you might otherwise would if you were doing a text or an email. And then there's something about the reflective process upon being able to read it a few times and take it in, to then respond differently.
The spoken word and the written word are so crucial in the foundations of Judaism, aren't they?
They are.
Because the communication of the law came through the scrolls known as the Torah. And that writing, that Torah, that was the word of God communicated to us. So he actually wrote us a letter.
That is one way to think about it, yes.
And if you think about it, too, with what you can read, if you know how to properly read that message, it's a love letter. It's a love letter to humanity with advice as to how to truly live. It is.
And it can be, for some people, some aspects of the Torah, they're not always so wonderful always, but I think that it is a message, and we learn from the pieces in it that are positive, and we learn from the pieces in it that are not so positive or that are difficult, right? There are ancestors who sometimes lie to get what they need, and so maybe the message is, this might not be such a good idea. And that's the beauty of it, too, because we tend to think of, religion or, our past, there's a sense of perfection, or, the ancestors, and we have this sense in Judaism, too, by the merit of our ancestors, and they were wonderful and they were amazing, but at the same time, they were people and they were imperfect. And so part of this love letter gives us the opportunity, or enables us to be ourselves and be imperfect beings, and work through that, sort of be that imperfect being, and that's okay, because that's who we are as human beings.
Absolutely. And in terms of the creation of a Torah, the writing, there's such a thing as a kosher Torah. It has to be done in the same calligraphy and the same type of parchment in the same way that it's been done for thousands of years, isn't it?
It is. And when someone writes it, they have to be in a certain space as well. They have to go to the mikvah, which is the ritual bath, every morning before that person writes. They have to write with a certain kind of ink and a certain kind of pen or feather or whatever, and the lines have to be exactly where the lines go, and no mistakes can be made actually in the writing, especially in the name of God. If a mistake is made actually in the name of God, then that part of the whole scroll, so the parchment holds about 5 columns of the words, and that whole parchment would have to be set aside and buried, and a new parchment would have to be made. If a mistake was made in any other letter, it could be erased with a little bit of a razor blade. And if it's readable, it could still be used. But God's name, if you make a mistake in, you have to bury the document.
Why do you have to bury it? That's fascinating.
You bury a document because this is a holy text, and a holy text is seen, in the Word of God, is seen as if it's human. And because of that, it's given the same treatment as one would a person when they die, which is they're buried, and they're treated with that kind of respect. And so we do with the Torah and also with other documents with God's name. Old prayer books or old Bibles that we use in the synagogue that aren't the Torah scroll itself. And usually in each community there's a ceremony once a year or so where a casket is filled with all of the books and papers of that year, and it's buried. To be given that honor. It's a living document, just as a person.
Which goes to prove your point, which we'll discuss in our next segment, that when we write a letter and write it with intention, with feeling, with spirit, and with love, it really becomes a living document, doesn't it?
It really does.
My guest this evening, Rabbi Elana Zaiman. She's the author of The Forever Letter, Writing What We Believe for Those We Love, and we'll be back with more of Elana after these words on the OMTimes radio network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Every Tuesday on Living with Moxie, join Shefali Burns and Donna Martouge in conversations designed to take you to the next level, where we highlight ideas, resources, and strategies that provide you with the leverage you require to meet and exceed your business and personal goals. Each week on Living with Moxie, we will lead conversations related to success, achievement, fulfillment, and extraordinary, vibrant living. Are you ready to live with Moxie? Join us.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience, an ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
And we're back on Destination Unlimited. My guest this evening, Rabbi Elana Zaiman. She's the author of The Forever Letter, Writing What We Believe for Those We Love. So, Elana, what exactly is a forever letter? It seems that there are several components to it. Please explain.
So a forever letter is a letter you write with the intention of it being a letter someone will want to hold on to forever. That's the magnitude of it. It's writing from your authentic self to another's authentic self, whom you love and care about. The sense of a forever letter is urgency. What do you most want to say to someone you love or care about or respect that you want to or need to say before you leave this earth? Now, not that you're going to leave it tomorrow. You may very well be here for a long time. But things like sharing love and gratitude and appreciation, maybe even hard truths, asking for forgiveness or offering forgiveness. We don't always say what we need to say or what we want to say. I find we often let relationships go. We don't take the time to really tend to them in a way that builds them up, often because we're too busy doing things that are, quote, more important. But here's a way to tend to them, to say what's important, to hold on to the meaning in the connection between two human beings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is it true that you first learned about the Forever Letter from your father when you were 14? How did he introduce you to it?
So I learned from my dad, but I learned about the ethical will. So the ethical will is a letter that's known in the Jewish world, and in past 20 years has come to be known in the larger world as well. But it was a letter that was part of the ethical tradition of the Middle Ages that was composed of parables and other treatises that were written by scholars. And this was the one avenue that the everyday person, non-scholar, could do, and that was usually a father at the time, but parents as the years went on. And what they would do is they would write a letter passing on their values and wisdom to their children. And that was what my father was doing. He was the rabbi of about 1,500 family congregation, and he had just finished leading an adult education class. And so he came home one day, and he handed me this booklet that said a collection of ethical wills, of which I knew nothing about. And he said to me, "Here, one of these is mine. Can you guess which one?" And I had no idea what they were, so I retreated into the den and I sort of read a little bit of his intro just to learn that these were letters and that they were somehow an urgent letter. And then I went and I looked through this booklet to try to find his, which I ultimately did. And that letter just has stayed with me for years and years, and it stayed with me, I think, in particular because here was my father, this community leader who seemed to be beloved by so many. And there was an aura, at least in the time I was growing up, and maybe still today in certain communities, that the rabbi was almost as close to God, as one could be. And so there was a sense of holiness that surrounded him, and almost perfection. And that's what I sensed coming my way from people in terms of how they talked with him. And that was a little bit of what I grew up feeling as well, especially as an adolescent. And when I read this document of his where he basically, was honest about who he was and shared a weakness or two of his, I was like, wow, my dad realizes that he's human. And for me, that was just so incredible. I knew he was human. I think I did, but it was conflicted. I was conflicted about it because I wasn't sure. And here he was saying he was human and loving us through his words, and it sounded just like him, and it just meant so much to me. And to this day, I held on to it, and I spoke about it for years, and so an ethical will came from that historical period, but often the ethical wills of that period were commanding in tone, and they were definitely about passing something downward in the hopes that whoever was receiving it, often children, and at least if we look at earlier documents in Judaism from the Talmud, teachers to students, oral texts were about passing wisdom on. And so the Forever Letter sort of came out of that. I began teaching about it, and I taught ethical will, and after a while I realized, you know what? This is really not an ethical will, because I'm encouraging everyone to write letters, not just parents downward, but I'm encouraging kids to write back to parents. I'm encouraging spouses and siblings and friends to write to one another. And I'm also encouraging something a little different, which is a more of a psychological approach, a way of showing up, and really contemplating key issues of forgiveness and contemplating tone, because I think how we show up in our tone and how we come across with the way we use our words will make a difference as to whether or not we will be heard. And so that's kind of the essence I'm trying to bring into the Forever Letter, to make it slightly unique and different from the ethical will, and also that the ethical will, it wasn't always written at the end of one's life. It was often written when the child maybe was born, and then added to over the years. But the sense of it was that anyway, the ethical will, by the way, was a terminology defined by Israel Abrahams, we believe, in the early 1900s. And he wanted to include this within the ethical literature of the day. But whenever I would talk about ethical wills, there was always this issue. People would say to me, an ethical will, that's when you write a last will and testament in an ethical way. Or, isn't that the living will piece? And so I needed a different terminology for people of all ages, and I needed different terminology so someone could actually know what it was they were talking about and not have a sense of not knowing, because it could refer to all these other things that it didn't. But the Forever Letter defines it as, what is that? What do you most want to say to someone? And what would someone want to hold on to? Whether they hold on to it in reality, in the written version, or in their hearts, but what would someone really want to hold on to? What can you say? How can you uplift someone? How can you share with someone authentically that will help them, maybe move forward in their lives, show them someone believes in them, where you can share your true self.
I want to touch back on your father for a moment. You had mentioned that in his role as a rabbi, there was an aura about him when he would work with people and counsel people, and when he would conduct services and so on and so forth. And yet, in the letter he wrote, the ethical will, or the Forever Letter that he wrote to you and to your family, he was more down to earth, more. It made him seem to be more human. When people are in a position of spiritual leadership, don't they have a tendency to just allow the nature of God to come through them? Isn't that what people are seeing?
I think in some ways the nature of God comes through, and I think the piece, though, that I was referring to, and I think that happens. I mean, when you write something that you spend a lot of time on, that sort of, it's a combination of coming from you and coming from something beyond yourself. But there is an aura about what that person is or who that person is, and I think that in some ways it's not positive for us to bestow upon a spiritual leader the almost feeling is, they're closer to God than any of us are. I don't believe that. I don't believe that because I'm a rabbi, I'm closer to God than someone else is. Someone else can be closer to God than I am, or they might just have I might have a little more knowledge, or maybe they have more knowledge. But it shows that I have designated time and study in this area, and that it's meaningful to me.
I agree with you 100%. I'm just saying a lot of people impart upon their spiritual leaders this holier, not holier than that, but that they are somewhat more connected to spirit than the average person is. And I think it's important for people to understand that they are educated, that they're trained, that they've been scholars in the field of their spirit and the field of their religion. And what they're doing is they're bringing a message through with full heart and soul. And as human as anyone else in their congregation or in their church or in their religious gathering.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think that it will be when we're able to see that, when we're able to see leaders as human, as we are doing so more and more today, that in some ways that's powerful. I remember visiting someone years ago in a nursing home, and she would behave very differently with me because I was the rabbi, and she would behave deferentially with me. And I said to her, I am like any other person. And it was just so interesting to me that she showed this deference because with many people, with most people, it allows, a trust to develop and an honesty and a sharing. But with her, it was the opposite. It was as if she had to behave on a higher moral level because she thought that's who she had to be. And so in that sense, it was distancing, and it made me feel sad that she felt she had to be this person other than who she might have otherwise been.
And how do you bridge that gap? How do you get across to someone like that?
Well, with that particular individual, it was difficult. I don't think I succeeded, and I don't think she wanted to hear otherwise. But I oftentimes, over time, I just get people to. I'd show up human. I show up with sharing strengths. I show up with sharing my weaknesses. I show up with humor. I ask questions. I'm real. I'm just myself. I'm real. I don't pretend to be someone I'm not.
You show up with your authentic self, which is so important for each of us to do in this world that we live in.
Yeah.
My guest this evening, Elana Zaiman. She's the author of The Forever Letter, Writing What We Believe for Those We Love. Elana, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about your work.
You can. The book is called The Forever Letter, and you can order it on Amazon or probably any bookstore. It's available. It will be released on September 8th. And it's having like a mentor to by your side as you think about writing such documents, such letters, and it's mixed with philosophy and story and guidance on how to write and edit a forever letter. It's a sharing of the forever letter my father wrote to me, and as well one that I wrote to my son.
And please tell our listeners your website one more time.
Website is www.elanazaiman.com.
Thank you. And we'll be back with more of Rabbi Elana Zaiman and the Forever Letter after these words from the OMTimes Radio Network.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM Radio Network.
Are you in an interfaith relationship and thinking of getting married? For 18 years, Reverend Lori Sue Brockway has been creating personalized, loving, and romantic ceremonies for couples of all faiths and cultural backgrounds. Reverend Lori Sue's sensitivity to the needs of interfaith couples is reflected in the compassionate and inclusive way she addresses the concerns of parents and families. Reverend Lori Sue is also the author of several best-selling books on interfaith weddings and wedding vows. Selected as one of the top interfaith officiants by New York Magazine, Reverend Lori Sue serves couples in the New York metropolitan area and beyond. Find out more at her website, yourinterfaithwedding.com.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
You're not wired to have a response to this sound. You're neutral to it, and you can hear it repeatedly without feeling anything. But when we introduce a new stimulus, save the food, we've achieved pulling a natural or inborn response from you. Save the food, because 40% of all food in the US never gets eaten. Save the food. Cook it, store it, share it. Just don't waste it. For tips and recipes, visit savethefood.com. Brought to you by NRDC and the Ad Council.
And we're back on Destination Unlimited. My guest this evening, Rabbi Elana Zaiman. She's the author of The Forever Letter, Writing What We Believe for Those That We Love. So there are gifts in the process of writing the letter as well. What are some of the things that people discover when they start writing the Forever Letter?
People discover things about themselves. And I think that the biggest key in this area is that oftentimes, if people are really honest as they're writing, they discover that who they thought they were is not who they really are. And I think that's one of the takeaways. There are others, but that's a big one. If we're really spent on doing some deep soul work and serious reflection, we often come to see ourselves and relationships slightly differently than we would otherwise. And the writing has something to do with it, because it helps us discover pieces of ourselves and our way of being in the world that just by speaking about something we might not otherwise come to discover.
So in essence, even though we're writing this to bequest to others in our family and our friends, we're also writing this for us.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's a great point, because there really is something that happens to us as we do it. It's just as much a reflective exercise for ourselves as it is for something we want to share. And to that end, when we give it, there often is people, if they don't hear back, people get very disappointed. Well, I wrote this letter, I wanted to share it. And sometimes, I don't know if we necessarily, it's not given with the intention of you have to receive something back. It's given as a gift. And hopefully, if you raise issues that are issues of forgiveness and things like that, that there might be a response. It might take a while. But it is as a gift, and you learn so much about yourself as you're writing it, and you also share that, and you also share that with the person you're writing to, and you also learn a little bit more about the person you're writing to. And it's a craft. It's how do I say these things in a way that this person might be able to hear. Maybe I didn't always use the right tone, or maybe I don't show up always in the right way when I speak. But here I have the opportunity to write something down and to let it sit for a while and to come back to it and to hone it. And maybe in my words I can communicate a deeper sense of love and belief in someone that I was unable to communicate just in the spoken word.
And you're writing this and you're reading it back to yourself and thinking, do I really sound like this? Is this the way I communicate or come across to people? So it gives you an opportunity to really self-reflect.
Absolutely. And when you write it, you don't want to sound like someone else, right? You really, if my father's letter sounded like Shakespeare, I would look at it and think, oh, well, okay, fine. My father's mimicking someone, not himself. So the fact that it was truly his voice, and it had his voice is a very truthful voice, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's sermonic, but it's really, he uses words in a beautiful way, and it was the same for that letter. And so it was him, and that's something that people want. People don't want someone to sound like someone else, someone who has perfect English if that person doesn't, right? If this ancient old woman were writing, let's say, and she was from the old country, and she could barely speak English, but she had some words she could say, and she was writing to, let's say, great-grandchildren, or she was writing to her sister or someone, and she wanted to write in English, maybe someone else takes down her words, but to not have her little, one of the things, you're from a different country, so you have a different way of saying something where you turn something around. If you don't have that thing that is uniquely them, it doesn't feel like them. You want it to feel like the person. It's not about creating a beautiful composition that you get an A on. It's about being who you are. And it's about it's about trying to be the best you can be, right? You show up in a way that you really want to show up.
Absolutely. Now, what about people who do not like to write or who think they have nothing to say? How would you coach someone like that?
There are a lot of people who don't like to write, and then even people who do like to write, there are a lot of worries, like I have nothing to say, or I'm not perfect, so who am I to write the letter? And the piece is, if you don't like to write, I still think I encourage people to write anyway. I think that there's something about the writing that takes people deeper. And I think that in part when people say, what I will hear is this. I will hear, if someone doesn't know who I am by how I've lived my life or by how I've approached them, then they really don't know me. What difference is another, a letter going to make? And I think otherwise. I think that the letter makes a ton of difference because it gives us an opportunity, as we've spoken about, to reflect, and it gives us an opportunity to show up in a different kind of way and to be thoughtful in a different kind of way. And I think part of this idea of not writing has to do with we just don't want to set the time aside to do it because we're too busy and we don't take it seriously. And that's the big piece, is to do it with intent, to say, I'm going to set aside time to do this because this is one of the most important things I'm ever going to do.
Absolutely. When is the appropriate time to begin a forever letter?
You can begin a forever letter whenever you want. You can start it, if you're writing to a child, you can start it when they're born and you can finish it years later. Or you can write many over the course of time. You could write it for a milestone, like a birthday or a confirmation or a wedding. Or if someone has the birth of your child, let's say, has the birth of their first child or your niece or something. Or you can write it for other instances as well. You can write it when someone loses a job, or maybe someone you know was just diagnosed with a terrible illness or went through a horrible divorce or something. You can reach out at any point in time in the other person's life or in your life. The point is that you have something you want to say to someone you care about deeply, and you just want to say it.
Absolutely. One of the practices that I've adopted over my 20-some-odd years of being an interfaith minister and wedding officiant is when I bring a couple together in my counseling before the wedding, I ask them to write a letter to each other as to why they're getting married to the other person that day. Not to show it, to bring it to me in sealed envelopes, and during the course of the ceremony, I present them back to them and tell them to put it in some sacred place within their home, because I said, one of you one day will wake up and look at the other person and say, why did I marry her, or why did I marry him? And on that day, I want you to take out your letter and read it back to yourself so you remember. And I think that's, so exchanging, how about couples exchanging letters when they get married? A great idea?
It's great. I do that too, actually. I do it slightly differently, though. I have them tell them, write a love letter to each other, and then I have them share it ultimately with each other when they come back to meet with me. I don't stay in the room. I have them just talk about it. I come back. And I just ask them if they learned anything new or different. And I also tell them that this is a letter they should hold on to. It's not anything I read. It's for them to hold on to remember, what this first time of falling in love and, the reason why they married each other as well. But this is for writing to anybody, for a spouse, a sibling, a friend. You have had a falling out, this might be, sometimes, you can't just pick up the phone and call, but it's easier to write a letter, and to maybe that opens a little bit of a door, and it gives a little space to the person to kind of take in what the letter is, and to maybe ultimately respond, or then to maybe call a few weeks later. But there's something about that it's on their own terms. It's not, oh my God, I'm answering the phone to someone I haven't talked to in like 3, 4, 5 years, and it wasn't good when we last connected. So this is an opening. It's a door. It's an opening.
In the process of creating a forever letter, in addition to passing on one's feelings about their loved ones and the lessons they wanted to impart and share, it's also about being known. Who was I in this lifetime? Who am I in this lifetime? Is there anything narcissistic about that?
I don't think there's anything narcissistic about that at all. I think to be known in our most authentic, real sense, known with our flaws, known with our strengths, appreciated and loved for who we are, not for who someone else wants us to be. And when we are sure that this is the way we're seen, we can be fully ourselves and not afraid that our flaws or our weaknesses render us unlovable.
Can a forever letter be used? I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you a question. Have you ever received meaningful letters that you've saved that you might deem today to be a forever letter?
Absolutely. No question about it. And I think it was a natural process for the people who sent them to me, too. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Can a forever letter be used to heal families or family rifts in some way?
I I believe it can, absolutely. And again, as I said before, I think it can open a door to a connection where perhaps there had been the connection had been closed for years. I mean, nothing's a guarantee ever, but if there is a true and honest communication written in a respectful and loving way, it's possible. And some families, there are rifts that go back generations and no one even knows why. And so this might open a door. I remember someone telling me a story once in a workshop. It was a man who hadn't had a great childhood with his father and wasn't really connected to him at all. And when the father was in his 70s, he reached out to his son via letter and said to his son that he wanted to kind of get together. And the son thought about it for a long time before he responded. And he realized, I'm not going to have a great relationship with my father, but some relationship with my father is better than no relationship with my father. So he basically, responded to his father, and they got together. And the impetus for the father writing was that the father was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And the father ended up living until he was in his mid-90s. And everyone in the workshop that evening thought, wow, that's amazing. And the father didn't lie that he had something wrong with him, right? One could think that. How does one live 20 more years? But was there something about letting go of this, of carrying this hurt or this, I didn't father well, and this non-connection with my child, that somehow by reaching out and trying to connect, and connecting even if it might not have been perfect, right? Is there something about that enabled him to live longer, that enabled him to somehow heal something that was broken in his heart?
And in the process of doing so, actually abate the cancer for that period of time and have that extended life to share with his children. My guest is Rabbi Elana Zaiman. She's the author of The Forever Letter, Writing What We Believe for Those We Love, and we'll be back with more after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Change and growth are part of natural life, and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
Tune in to The Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World with me, host Robin Fritz, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. I'll cover personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice, and more, all to help you tap your own intuitive and healing skills. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Most of my family, they never graduated high school, so I'm trying to break that barrier. My daughter, Brooklyn, was also a motivation for me to go back to school. Every day after work, went straight to school, and it paid off.
At age 26, Kareem finished his high school diploma.
I could not have done it alone. I see the future is really bright for me.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Hello, it's me, the designer jeans in the back of your closet. What happened to us? I used to summer in the Hamptons, and now I'm stuck behind a pair of sweats. Okay, maybe I never really fit you right, but I got a lot more Sunday fun days left in me. So take me to Goodwill, where I can really make a difference.
Your donations to Goodwill create jobs, training programs, and education assistance for people in your community. To find your nearest donation center, go to goodwill.org. Donate stuff. Create jobs. A message from Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this evening, Rabbi Elana Zaiman. She's the author of The Forever Letter, Writing What We Believe for Those We Love. So, what are some of the questions that people can ask themselves in the process of creating The Forever Letter?
I'll give a few. I have a lot of prompts and questions and exercises in the book itself. And some of them are actually some questions are related to ourselves as we write, and other questions are geared to the person to whom we're writing. So it's important to sort of have reflective questions on both. But, where I usually begin is, who am I? What do I stand for? What are my values? Am I currently living my life in a way that feels true to myself? And what do I most want to tell the person about me that's crucial to our connection? And what do I most want to tell that person about him or herself? So how do I uplift the other? How do I share with the other maybe some pieces of that person that I know and that I sense, and help that person feel known? And how do I also share something about me that might be beneficial for that person to hear in terms of how we connect? Maybe I had this horrible experience when I was a kid and I never shared, and I want to share that now because that is indicative of how I showed up in my life the way I did, and just sort of came to that knowledge, and that might help build a better future for that relationship.
And again, in the process of doing the writing, there's a healing that takes place.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And in taking responsibility, whether or not the family chooses to read the letter, the person is therefore communicating their request for forgiveness basically to God.
Yeah, basically to God, also to themselves, that they tried, that this is an intention that they made, and if the letters sit unopened in a drawer for years, they sit there, and who knows? Maybe someone will ultimately open it after the person who wrote them died, or maybe the next generation will open it and see, wow, this was what went on in our family. We don't have to repeat this.
Is there a way of increasing the chances of our forever letters being read?
I think that if we write to people in a certain, there are techniques that we can use to help that, and I suggest many, but let me just share two. One is that we share our own personal experiences, and we do so from a place of humility. So if I am trying to, if I'm perhaps not happy with something that someone's doing, and I just say, this really isn't a good idea, that I probably won't be heard. But if I say, I had a similar experience in my life, and here's what I learned from it, and you will make whatever choices you make. But I share this because, had someone shared an experience like this with me, it might have changed the way that I understood something or a choice that I might have made. So I think that is something that's open for us to do. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is to really be vulnerable, be who you are, and express faults. Because I will listen, if someone approaches something and you asked about narcissistic or, an arrogant way, if someone approaches something and like, this is what you should do, or, listen to me. But if someone approaches something and says, I didn't do such a good job at this, and I'll admit it, and I am sorry that I didn't. And this is why maybe I didn't. I was going through a really hard time that you knew nothing about, and I blew it. And let me tell you about this time. And I just, I want to share it with you. And then, because we're all human and we're all flawed, and if someone else hears the human story from the other, they're more willing to share. Haven't you had that experience, like you ask someone a question and they answer it like glibly, but then you tell them something about you that's meaningful, and it shifts the whole conversation, and then then they share something about themselves that's big. And so when we open up in this way, it increases our chances of being heard.
Absolutely. You mentioned in your book that you wrote a letter to your son and it made you cry. What if people are afraid it will hurt writing a forever letter?
It will. That's okay. what it will hurt. It's not any external hurt that comes. It's an internal. And the hurt is not just negative. It could be positive, right? You feel, why did I cry when I wrote to my son? I was feeling so much love. If this is the last letter, right, that I'm writing to him, if it would be, what do I most want to say to him? And I had to imagine myself as if I were no longer a part of this world. And so how do I think about that relationship? How did I not do so well? How could I do better? And it took me to places that were hard for me to see in myself. And yet, once I saw them and once I could really acknowledge them, it enabled me to then be able to maybe just do a better job than I was doing before. So I don't believe that it's quite a forever letter unless you get to that point of really being that reflective and that soul conscious of this is good. Maybe we can feel more whole thereafter, and maybe that wholeness, maybe that connection and that sharing is what enables us to be real.
What if it hurts?
It's okay to cry. It's okay to cry.
Well, this leads into my next question. What if it hurts to read the letter because a family member feels guilty or ashamed of their behavior?
So, if it hurts for someone who's received, so the person
the recipient,
the recipient,
exactly.
Wait, the person who wrote it felt ashamed, and the person reading it is feeling ashamed of. I'm not understanding.
If the recipient of the letter is feeling painful or sorrowful because their family member is expressing their guilt or shame about their behavior,
I would think it might. I would think it might be the opposite. In other words, if someone was expressing shame or guilt or sadness, it might give this opportunity to this other person to say, to sort of give a forever letter back, to say, you're too hard on yourself. This is not who you were. Or if the person does express things that were actually true, and it brings back pain for the person reading it, if the person has expressed in a way their truth, there are boxes people don't want to open, but sometimes if that person is receptive to what is there, then hopefully the share is not just leaving guilt and shame, but is approaching it in a way that, shares a piece of who that person was, so that the person receiving it will better come to understand that person, even if that person, let's say a mother, was on drugs for most of her children's life, and then she writes a letter wanting to connect when she hasn't been connected to them for years. And so receiving that letter, hearing from that mother for the first time in ages, will be like, oh my God, do I even want to open this? Okay, maybe I do. So if I do, let me see what happens. And what is she going to say? If it's a letter of, shame and blame and whatever, it's different. But if it's a letter where this woman, where this mother is saying, I blew it, I am so sorry. I finally, came to see who, I've now been, off of, alcohol and drugs for 8 to 10 years. I've been thinking about you all these years. I know I didn't do well by you, and I didn't want to write until I knew I was really at a good place. And you might not want to talk to me. I don't know. I'd love to be able to see you and see who you've become, and I know I'm not the mother I could have been or should have been, and I am so, sad about that. And you might not want me in your life, and okay, but if there's a chance for us to connect, and for me to be able to tell you in person, I blew it, I would love to, and if there's a chance for me to get to know you and to try to become the person I wasn't, maybe there's still a possibility.
So
I always think there's a possibility.
So the forever letter really can be a gateway to forgiveness.
Absolutely. One of my favorite stories. Do we have time for a quick
Go ahead,
story?
please, go ahead.
One of my favorite stories is, it was told by Sue Kidd, and it was a story where there was a man who was admitted to a hospital for a heart attack, and he said to the nurse, please call my daughter. and he explained that he hadn't spoken. She was the only living relative, and he hadn't spoken to her in a while, maybe a year, because they had words with each other. And the nurse calls the daughter, and backstep. The father said, "Just call my daughter. She needs to know." And when the nurse called the daughter was the one who said, "Don't let him die. I'll be there. I'll be there in 20 minutes. We had a terrible argument a year ago, and I've been wanting to ask for his forgiveness or say I'm sorry, and I just never did." And the daughter appears at the hospital, and the nurse sees the doctor telling her that the father had died. He had died shortly before she arrived. And she asked the nurse to take her to her dad, and she is by his bedside, putting her head in his sheets and crying. And the nurse sees a small piece of paper on the bedside table, I believe. And the paper, I don't remember exactly the words, but it said something like, "My dearest Janie, I forgive you. Please forgive me too." Oh. And what that letter did is, there was, this went on for a year or so, that this not being talking to one another, each one unable to do that apology. And by that father writing that letter, that brief little note that he scrawled before he died, I mean, it enabled the forgiveness to happen. It enabled her to continue on with her life, knowing that they both had a piece of this. And my guess is it enabled her to live a healthier life than feeling like her father died without her being able to say, I love you, goodbye. And it said I love you, the letter ended with I love you. And it's like, wow, what an amazing gift that is.
Her book is called The Forever Letter, Writing What We Believe for Those We Love. Rabbi Elana Zaiman, please tell our listeners one more time where they can get your book and find out more about your work.
You can find out more about my work at my website, www.elanazaiman.com. And as to where you can buy the book, hopefully at a bookstore or at Amazon.com or wherever you would like to choose to go out and get it.
Thank you for joining us tonight. This is really wonderful, and your work is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.